your election, we don't appoint them on our side, Sam, we elect them, is a high point, and I think it's going to benefit aviation and the industry very well. Like the two before me, I want to thank all of those who worked without pay during the 35 days. I also want to thank those who were furloughed and come back to a mountain of work and feel like maybe that they're not essential. They are essential, and I want to assure them that that, in part, is why we have this legislation for us today. I met with local employees, including air traffic controllers, and one younger, newer controller was working overtime because my tower, like many across the country, is understaffed, so they're already working overtime shifts. But he also, because of a lack of pay, had to take a job as an Uber driver. So how rested is that young man if he works extra hours in a very stressful job and then undertakes something else that barely makes him minimum wage so that they can at least put food on the table? That just can't happen again. And that certainly happened to people, and I'm sure TSA workers and many others were doing that in addition to the garage sales and all those other stupid things that were recommended they do or they had to do out of necessity. You know, I'm concerned that the system wasn't as safe as it could and should be during the shutdown because of that reason I already mentioned, people stressed out, not getting paychecks, doing extra work to provide for their families. You know, aviation is too critical to allow this to happen again, and you know, we still haven't gotten over the impacts of the 2013 shutdown, where the school was closed and a bunch of the people who were in the school, some of them aged out actually, and others just didn't come back. And I imagine this time it might even be worse because it was a longer shutdown, and they're going to question, boy, am I going to go through this rigorous training process to get a job where every once in a while I'm working for free? You know, so we're discouraging the next generation, and we're already at a critical point with so many people eligible to retire. And by the way, if they say, wow, retirees got paid and I didn't, maybe it's time for me to pull the plug, they're not going to be there to train that next generation of air traffic controllers. So we've got to provide some certainty to those who are working there now and those who want to work there in the future and those who work in other aspects. You know, the critical things that the FAA is working on didn't get done. It took me 3 years to finally push back against the model aircraft people and require that we have remote drone identification, which is absolutely critical, or we're going to be shutting down airports all around the country because some idiot is illegally flying their drone and we can't find them. And sooner or later, they're going to fly one into a turbine engine, and maybe we're going to have a catastrophic failure. So they've got to get that rule out. The flight attendant duty time rule was delayed. Many other critical rulemakings were delayed at the FAA. So, you know, that's why we've introduced this legislation. The FAA is unique. It pays for itself. Why should they be subject to a shutdown? And it is so critical, and it's so safety critical, and it's internationally critical. So, I mean, this is, I think, a common sense piece of legislation. I'm hopeful that once we get whatever deal is coming forth this week passed, if we get it passed and if it gets signed by the President and we don't have another shutdown, which I'm cautiously optimistic, that people will look favorably upon our legislation as a way of preventing this sort of dysfunction in the future. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would now like to move to the panel. Do you want? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, first I'll move to the to Mr. Graves. The other